what GNH catches is happiness. Although GNH is basically creating conditions for people to practice their own happiness, happiness is very subjective and very individual. But given the fact that the word contains happiness and the desire, ultimate goal or aim of every human being is to be happy. So this term actually catches the minds of the individuals, in fact, to come and participate and learn how can they create happiness for themselves. And when we talk about individual happiness, then we try to encourage them to be mindful and meditative and look for happiness inwardly and not outward, because happiness is individual. And if you are content, contentment in other words is the root of happiness. If you are content, you can find happiness for yourself. Basically, gross national happiness is a term that was propounded by our fourth king, that gross national happiness was more important than gross national product. Basically, he has seen the world around. As a young boy, he knew that one day he will be the king of Bhutan, and he was wondering what kind of development should he bring to the country, so that, knowing that ultimately every human being desires for happiness. So what is that model that can be brought to Bhutan so that Bhutan could, all Bhutanese could participate in the process of happiness or be happy at the end of the day? This was propounded by him in Mumbai when he was traveling into the country after the non-allied meeting in Middle East. And this was picked up by the government, trying to live up to the dreams of the king for the people of the country. So they started working with 4 pillars known as sustainable and equitable socio-economic development, good governance, preservation of culture, and conservation of environment. These were the 4 pillars on which the development has gone for last more than 40 years now. But the world started to wonder, how can you measure this? And the idea of the country was not to measure it. In fact, we were trying to say that we human beings are not above the nature. We are a part of the nature in this entire existence, and we must learn to be a part of the existence. By that, he meant that we should be integrated with nature, we should be socially resilient, we must be culturally resilient, that we cannot be divided. He had seen these awful things happening in the world, where woods are vanishing from your forest in the name of GDP, the gross domestic product. He realized that what gross domestic product does is a limitless growth that has no threshold. It is not defined, and it's using all the finite resources of earth. And he knew this cannot be the model of development for this nation. So therefore, this, what he propounded as gross national happiness is more important than gross national product, became the policy and the philosophy of this country. And as the world started to ask, but how do you measure this? Then we had actually over 60 global leaders in different subjects like ecological experts, psychological experts, economic experts, education experts, health experts, community experts. We brought them together to say, we have now realized that there are 9 domains that are required to create conditions for the people so that people can practice their own happiness within the sphere of these 9 domains. Then this world sat together to design a measure for the GNH. And so now we have 4 pillars, 9 domains, 33 indicators and 124 variables to measure these 9 domains, whether they're equitable in a society or not. So for example, the research could find out that in a village called Chokor, women between the age of 35 and 55 are unhappy. And the reasons could be that they have to spend a lot of their time to go to collect water, and they do not reach to the threshold of education. So what does the government do to bring equitable development like any other place is they will put in a plan, in a 5-year plan, to bring water to nearer to the women so that they don't spend a lot of time, because time use is one of the 9 domains of happiness. And also non-formal education will be put in practice so that they can come to the level of the other similar age groups of women in the country. So that's how the country tries to define or desires to bring equitable development into the entire nation. If you see why GNH and why not GDP, actually that is the crux, the very point on which the GNH sits actually. For example, if I cut today, or if the government decides to cut all this 72% of forests and sell it to India, our GDP from here will rise like skyrocket high. But standing trees, the ecology, we don't think about what will happen to the ecology, to the biodiversity. And tomorrow if that happens, we are ruined. So the country even tried to see what is our natural wealth, and we found out that 760 billion worth of natural wealth we produce every year, of which we use about 40%, and 60% we share to the world outside, to our neighbors, China in north and India in south. And it is from the clean glacier-fed water, the pristine forest we have, the glaciers we have. This all contributes to our natural wealth. And so Bhutan has promised itself to be carbon neutral for all its life. In the constitution, we have very well embedded that Bhutan shall remain covered by forests at all times, 60% of land cover. So it's a huge kind of thing, although we are almost close to 80% today. The other example I can give about GDP is that if wife and husband decide to go to work and keep a nanny to look after her child or their child, then what they pay to a nanny is actually accounted at GDP. But if one of the parents decides to stay home and rear the child up, look after the child, he or she's time is not accounted for GDP. And that's a loss to GDP because she doesn't earn anymore, she doesn't save anymore, but she's rather busy raising a child which has no meaning for GDP. Therefore, GDP we feel is a failed kind of growth paradigm. Also because we've seen that there is ecological divide, which means that people are no more connected with nature. They think nature is there to serve us and not the other way around. There's social divide where the rich are getting richer. Some of the continents or countries are so very rich, while we have billions of people in Asia and Africa going hungry every day. A neighbor doesn't know neighbor. So the societal divide is so large, and because of this, people have found to be very, depressed. So the antidepressant medicines today are sold 400 times more in last 10 years in the US alone. It has crossed 10 times more in the world globally. So, people get very depressed because they have no integration with nature and they have no integration with their own families. In the West that I've seen, a mother takes appointment with a child and all she wants to say is how much she loves him or her and how much she misses them, and nothing more. But that's the world we are living today. That's the reality. The third reality that we have is the societal. Because of the societal divide, we have the economic divide. The divide that poor are so poor, rich are so rich that it's said that the researchers found out that the North America alone, the West in a year, is enough to feed 3 years the entire globe population. So that's the West we're talking about. The footprints that North America is leaving, if we combine all of that of Asia, and including the big countries like China, India, and as well Brazil, still the ecological footprint that's left through West by North America is much larger.